All right, well, welcome everybody. My name's Chris Chalenza. I'm the James B. Knapp Dean of the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences here at Johns Hopkins University. And I just can't tell you how delighted and happy I am that you're all here for this celebration of everything: scientific progress, advocacy, the quest to educate the next generation of civic leaders, scientists, pathfinders. This is just such a wonderful event, and I'm glad you're with us, and I'm glad to all the audience who are watching online as well. Now, the inspiration for this evening is former Senator Barbara Mikulski. She now serves as our Homewood Professor of Public Policy in our Department of Political Science in the Krieger School. Let me tell you a little bit about her. As the state of Maryland's longest tenured U.S. Senator, she worked tirelessly to advocate for civil rights, national security, education, jobs, women's health, senior citizens, veterans, and space exploration. That last one might surprise you, but after her election to the U.S. Senate in 1986, the senator served on the Senate Appropriations Committee and its subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, and Science, whose oversight included NASA. In addition to being a leader in space policy, she advocated for the NASA budget and championed new NASA projects and missions such as the Hubble Space Telescope. As the senator puts it, she was insistent and persistent in leading the charge to obtain funding for Hubble's first servicing mission. The senator had the keen foresight to know that Hubble could only continue to unlock deep mysteries of the universe if support for it continued. More than 2 decades after that successful mission to service Hubble, the senator was back at it again, this time fighting for full funding of Hubble's successor, the James Webb Space Telescope. And this brings us to tonight, which is part of a series hosted by Johns Hopkins University and the Space Telescope Science Institute to spark interest in and awareness of NASA's observatories and how they enhance our understanding of space. So tonight, first we're going to watch the premiere of a short documentary that explores Senator Mikulski's role in advocating for Hubble. Then a panel of Johns Hopkins experts will talk about the state of scientific progress. This discussion is going to be led by our moderator, Dr. Nancy Levinson, the Deputy Director of the Space Science Telescope Institute and a research professor in our Department of Physics and Astronomy. She will give more fulsome introductions to the panel, so I will forego that here. Part of the conversation will focus on the James Webb Space Telescope, which is scheduled now to launch next month on December 18th from French Guiana, and whose Science and Operations Center is right here on campus in the Muller Building. The documentary was created by filmmakers supported by our Saul Zentz Innovation Fund and our graduate program in Film and Media Studies. It's one of 3 films that use examples from Senator Mikulski's illustrious career to explore the link between public service and the interests of today's students. That's why I'm delighted that so many of our students, particularly our undergraduate students, are here with us tonight. For those non-students who are watching, I should say that here at Johns Hopkins, we pose something we call a common question every year. It's something that's intended to stimulate discussion among our student body, something we can all return to in different venues and different formats. This year's question is, what is progress? And I think it's clear that this kind of a discussion tonight is going to help us frame that question in different and interesting ways. And I guess I'd say a final thing about tonight is just to show how you need collaboration. You need collaboration among scientists, policymakers, and many others. This is critical to the furtherance of human knowledge and scientific innovation. So if we look at some of the greatest projects in the world, including the Hubble and James Webb Telescope, it's obvious that all of that partnership on many levels is key to their success. Here, we're very proud to be part of that tradition. We're inspired by it, and I hope all of you tonight are equally inspired as well. So thank you very much for being here. Thanks very deeply to our panelists. Thank you to the Senator for the heroic work you've done. Welcome to all of you. I'm going to stop talking now and say that we can now roll the tape.
It is said that a supernova can radiate as much energy as the sun will emit over its entire lifetime. When I was a little elementary school girl, my parents wanted me to know about my Polish heritage, so they took me to see the famous movie about Madame Curie. I was mesmerized. A brilliant Polish woman who discovered a whole new scientific radium and changed the world and made it a better place. As time went on, I thought I wanted to be a scientist and really do something in the area of research and discovery, just like her. But I found I was klutzy at science. I was not very good in the lab. What I found, thanks to very good teachers, was that I had a knack for social sciences. And I ran for the Baltimore City Council, defied the odds, beat the political bosses who were cigar-smoking, pot-bellied guys, and became a Baltimore City Councilwoman, then to the Congress, and then to the Senate. And what I saw in my role, particularly in holding elective office, but even as a social worker, was about the empowerment of others. As a member of Congress, when I would do my visits with constituents, and particularly major institutions, I would ask them, so explain the mission. Where are we? And how can I help you be you? I'd already had a very close relationship with Johns Hopkins University. Of course, everyone knows the Broadway campus and its brilliant work in life science. But President Muller also emphasized the role of the National Science Foundation and all of the other sciences here. And as an early member of Congress, President Muller reached out to me, and working again with my predecessor, Senator Mathias, helped bring the Space Telescope Institute here. And that's when I learned about this fabulous idea and concept, so daring, so bold, the Hubble telescope.
So the Hubble is an astronomical telescope. It's designed to look at very distant stars and galaxies. And it's the size of a school bus flying in the vacuum of space. It goes around the Earth in 97 minutes. And so it looks out into space and collects all those very faint objects and takes pictures, then transmit the data back down to our Space Center in Baltimore here on the Homer campus. You have to imagine what it'd be like if your eye was 2.5 meters large and you could keep it open for weeks at a time. That's what the Hubble can see. That's how it sees these faintest galaxies. So they stared at a little spot in the sky that was completely dark for 10 days. And they saw in that single spot 10,000 galaxies. So we live in this magical era of scientific discovery with amazing tools to explore the universe in a way mankind has never had before. We have never had the ability to look so far back in time or to look for life around other planets as we have today. And if the senator had not been a supporter of space science and a supporter of the way of doing science this way, we wouldn't be living through this amazing era.
I don't think there are enough superlatives to describe how important Hubble has been for my research and for all fields of astrophysics. Hubble truly fundamentally advanced multiple fields of astrophysics and planetary science with its exquisite imaging capability and its ultraviolet capability. That's work we simply can't do from the surface of the Earth, no matter how big our telescopes are.
Professor Saul Perlmutter, Professor Brian Schmidt, Professor Adam Rees. You have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics.
When I came to the Space Telescope Science Institute in 1999, the year before, my colleagues and I had been involved in this pretty remarkable discovery that the expansion of the universe is accelerating and that the universe is filled with dark energy. So I came to the Space Telescope Science Institute to follow up on some of that work using the Hubble Space Telescope. And as soon as I arrived, I learned a great deal about Senator Mikulski, that she was this incredible champion for many things, but particularly for space science. So she became, to me, sort of this patron saint of the kind of work that I do. I jokingly referred to her as an unexpectedly powerful force in the universe, very much like the dark energy that my colleagues were studying.
In 1990, the Hubble telescope finally launched.
And liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope.
This is after 10 years and millions of dollars and thousands of scientists and engineers working to build the Hubble. And we all waited for the call home when the eye of the Hubble would open and using its mirrors would look out on the galaxies and the wonders of the universe. And as we waited and we waited, and then little fuzzballs came back, there was incredible disappointment. Instead of a great scientific observatory, did we have what I called a techno-turkey.
There's a significant spherical aberration appears to be present in the optics.
The one instrument where we have a major problem, of course, is the wide field planetary camera.
It's still a unique machine. I mean, there's no question about it.
So like any good public policy person, along with Senator Garn, we turned to experts. We had to pursue a reality. The scientific community said this is both desirable and it is feasible, but it's going to be expensive. We went to work on the affordability, and we were able to put together the coalition to find the political will and the political wallet that did it. In 1993, with fingers crossed, we had the launch.
I chair the subcommittee that financed the manufacture of the most significant contact lens in American history, the fix on the Hubble Space Telescope. And I'm happy to announce today that after its launch now in 1990, some of its earlier disappointments, the trouble with Hubble is over.
She's bursting in, go high.
And I think we may have some up-to-date information on IBM.
Raw laser printer output, this is as raw as it gets. We can actually see the impact site itself.
In 2004, we were prepared for a new servicing mission of the Hubble Space Telescope to replace the batteries and the gyroscopes, but also to put new instruments in the telescope that would really expand our ability to measure the expansion of the universe. And after the Columbia accident, the administrator at the time, Sean O'Keefe, announced that they were canceling that mission, which was terribly disappointing, but also really would have crippled the kind of research that we were doing.
The news that Hubble would not be serviced again was immediately something that the team said, well, that can't happen.
There was like a hush that fell over the scientific world. And Mr. O'Keefe said he canceled it for budgetary reasons and also the safety of the astronauts.
Senator Mikulski sort of rode in like the cavalry, and she was committed to see if it was possible to do that mission. So she encouraged a second opinion in studying the particulars of the risk of servicing the Hubble Space Telescope.
At a hearing with Sean O'Keefe, I said to him that he had made a lethal diagnosis about not sending a service mission to Hubble. And like anything, when you get a bad diagnosis, I wanted a second opinion, borrowed from life sciences here. And I asked that, could we get a second opinion from the scientific community about the risk to the astronauts, and was the prize worth the price that we were going to pay? Sean O'Keefe said yes.
It was at that point that I began to realize the complexity of the policy landscape that the senator was beginning to navigate. So the first thing she did was organize a National Academy study, that's the National Academy of Sciences, and got some very prestigious people together to actually ask the question of aerospace experts, scientific experts, is the Hubble worth saving, and is it more dangerous to go to the Hubble than it is to go to the space station? This was much more about than just science. This was about public engagement in science. This was about encouraging STEM across the nation. This was about a global image.
We turned to the experts to truly advise us, and all of the advice came back and said, it's risky, but it's sure worth it.
She knew that she was putting astronauts' lives at risk when she was putting them into asking them to go up to the Hubble. And so she actually went to speak to them.
What did they think about a risky mission, particularly after a national tragedy? And each and every one of them told me this is why they signed up. They knew that they had to take a risk, but they felt the risk was worth it, that they would be part of some of the greatest scientific discoveries in mankind, that the Hubble had rewritten the story of the universe.
We are going to add a shuttle servicing mission to the Hubble Space Telescope to the shuttle's manifest to be flown before it retires. We anticipate
working across the aisle and working across the dome with our House of Representatives colleagues, we came up with the resources. And then once again, the scientific and engineering community stepped up to fashion what it would take to service it. And our astronauts were ready to go and do it. And then we launched the final mission.
That was a really amazing moment for all of us on the staff when the mission launched, and it was powerful to show all the work that had gone into that advocacy, both not just from our team on the Senator's team, but the entire scientific community and NASA.
What a beautiful spaceship we're on, guys. There are two people that are very special to Hubble that I'd like to thank. Senator Mikulski and Ed Weiler, without whom we wouldn't have a servicing mission 4, and of course, Mike Griffin.
I was so emotional about this. I felt like a lot of other people, I had a personal relationship with the Hubble. The Hubble and I had been through a lot together. Like the rest of the world, I had developed an admiration and even an affection for what the Hubble was continually telling us and inspiring us about the universe. And when they were going to close the hatch and it was going to go out on its final journey, I felt like I was just saying goodbye to a dear friend.
I want to wish Hubble its own set of adventures, and with the new instruments we've installed, that it may unlock further mysteries of the universe.
You know, this was the last time the human race saw the Hubble Space Telescope as it drifted slowly away.
You know, Hubble was an instrument, but it had a personality and a family, and that family was all of us.
You know, she'd always said that the data that we collect with the Hubble is for everyone, and that the images should be made free and publicly available. And we keep that data in an archive. And so we decided to name the archive afterward, the Mikulski Archive for Space Telescopes.
As you look at policymaking, so many different backgrounds, different perspectives, different voices are really important in those conversations, no matter what the issue is. Learning how to listen for all of those voices and include them in the conversation and build a collective that can help is really what policymaking is all about.
In the Senate, you need to be able to rely on your staff. And I had great people working with me who were smart and capable, but they also had the same spirit of wanting to make the world a better place and how we could look out for the day-to-day needs of our constituency, but the long-range needs of our country. And so we're like part of the Hubble gang. We'll always be part of the Hubble gang. And we feel that was one of the great honors of our life. You know, we'll never go into space. We'll never be an astronaut. We won't win the Nobel Prize. But you know what? That's okay. What we know is that we helped Hubble be Hubble because we made sure that others got to be who they were.
The original idea was that we would get 5 years of life. Well, here we are. You know, the servicing mission was in 2009. Because the astronauts did such a good job, we still have a very, very healthy Hubble.
When we found many new supernovae, but one in particular after that servicing mission, we named it Supernova Mikulski, which seemed like a very appropriate metaphor for the senator as this, incredibly powerful force unexpectedly showing up.
I've shared a lot of awards and recognitions with other senators, and happy to do so. But I gotta say, nobody's had a supernova named after them. I mean, how cool is really that? Be best at what you're best at, and be best at what you're needed for. And be persistent, and if necessary, even very insistent.
Terrific. That was just so wonderful to see, so inspiring, and so many important themes for many of us, about challenges, about discovery, about the teamwork and the many people it takes to accomplish these great things. And we'll have a chance now to explore this a little bit further with our panel, and also with questions coming from the audience here in person and also online. So let me introduce the panelists. I'll remind you, I'm Nancy Levinson, and as Dean Chalenza introduced, I'm the Deputy Director here at the Space Telescope Science Institute and also a research professor at Johns Hopkins University. Joining us, we have Joseph Katz, the William F. Ward Distinguished Professor at the Johns Hopkins Whiting School of Engineering and a member of the National Academy of Engineering, who's known for his outstanding contributions to engineering research, practice, and education, and advances in developing optical methods in experimental fluid dynamics for turbomachinery, cavitation, turbulence, and environmental flows. He is a professor of mechanical engineering. Dr. Sabina Stanley is a Bloomberg Distinguished Professor at Johns Hopkins University in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences and the Space Exploration Sector of the Applied Physics Lab. Prior to joining Johns Hopkins, she was a postdoctoral researcher at MIT and a professor at the University of Toronto. Sabina leads the Magnetism and Planetary Interiors Research Group as they investigate the dynamics and evolution of planetary interiors. David E. Kaplan is a professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy here at Hopkins. His primary research interests are in theoretical particle physics and cosmology, with emphasis on understanding the laws, evolution, and contents of the universe. He discovers possible theoretical extensions to the standard model of particle physics and cosmology, and the novel ways to discover those and other models. He also created and produced the documentary film Particle Fever, for which he won a DuPont Journalism Award and other accolades. So thank you all for joining us here in the panel. And I'll kick it off with some questions for you in particular. Start with Sabina and others who may want to join in afterward. One theme is that the work that we've been doing here is very high stakes and also has uncertain outcomes in both the near and short term. And so I'd like to hear about some of those challenges for the research that you're finding, especially thinking about the undergraduates in the audience, that this kind of research is different from the problem sets that we might assign to you, where there are definite answers, and we expect you to find those definite answers, where in this case, we don't know the outcomes. And also, it doesn't always work. And so that was the thing I wanted to ask you about, if you could speak maybe even personally about some of the role of failure in your scientific lives. Is this failure necessary for progress, or do we learn from it?
Thanks, Nancy. I mean, I think I'll start with something a little counterintuitive. I think that if you're not failing at least some of the time, then you're probably not trying hard enough. And I don't mean necessarily, you have to study more to fail at a test or something, but I mean, you're probably not tackling the really challenging problems, right? The things that don't have those easy solutions. And so it's key to always consider, what am I doing, and, how risky is this, and how important is it to me? So it's really important to stick with thinking about what are my values, what are my goals, and how am I going to reach those with what I'm doing? And if there is an element of failure in that, there usually is, you have to learn to be okay with that. That's the hardest thing, right? So usually what happens is you start a project, it's risky at the beginning, and you get into it and you have some success, and then something goes wrong. And then you're like, oh my gosh, why did that go wrong? This was supposed to be perfect. And then you have to remember back to that time when you were like, no, this was really hard. And because it's really hard, there was going to be a learning curve. There was going to be setbacks. There were going to be these starts and stops and these failures. And you have to learn to figure out what to do about that. I think the key thing is to have a plan, learn to practice the skills of resilience, right? So when I suffer a failure, which happens a lot, my first instincts are grab that tub of ice cream, binge watch Netflix for, the rest of the month. That's what I'm going to do, right? And that sometimes I need to do that, and that's okay, right? It's okay to do that kind of thing. But I also have to think about how I'm going to be resilient in this situation. So the first thing I do is I think about, why did I want to do this? Align it back with your values. Align it back with your goals. It's much easier to keep doing something when you realize, I just have to do this. That this is just who I am and what I have to do, right? And then it's okay to end up in those situations where you might fail along the way. The other key thing is have a really good support system. Many of these big projects that people are involved in, right? They're teams that do this, right? You are not alone when you're doing this. And if you can work with a group of people where you all learn to support each other during these times when there are failures, right? Where sometimes you're the supporter, sometimes you're the supported, then you can kind of get through these times. So I think that's what I would say.
That's great. Do any of the rest of you want to add your personal experiences of failure as inspiration for the rest of us?
Sure. Well, I guess I want to say something a little different about failure, which is that for scientific research, it's a built-in necessity. I, in fact, look for failure constantly. The way I actually come up with an idea and see if it's a good one is I try to kill it. And if I can't kill it, then I tell it to my colleague next door, and then they tell me it's trivial, it's wrong, somebody else did it, yell at me, try to find fault with it. And they either do or they don't. And if they don't, then I find more people. I search for somebody to tell me how ridiculous my idea was, because it's the only way to actually come up with something that holds water. The big ideas are going to be pockmarked with bazillion failures. But failures is just it's part of trying to discover something significant. When you're looking for something, like somewhere in this desert there's an oasis. Failure then would be defined as every place you look, if there's no oasis there, then you've failed. But that's, of course, ridiculous. It's a search. And so that means all the way until the moment you find something, you've failed. So if that's the definition of failure, I think failure means research. On the other hand, I would say the only way you really fail is by quitting, because the only people who succeed are the ones who didn't quit. And so you could also define failure as just deciding not to succeed. And that's how I think about the things I do. There's going to be failure that are short-term problems. There are going to be things I work on for 2 years and then discover it doesn't make any sense. But that's just part of the process of finding the oasis.
Thanks so much, David.
Well, I think there are two kinds of failures that are part of this discussion. One is the failure idea that just looked like it didn't work. So when the Hubble went up, I mean, that could have been one of the biggest scientific failures on the record of the American government funding science. So when I called it was it going to be a techno-turkey, and my wonderful staff who worked with me over those years is here, they remember that, and we were aghast when those little fuzzballs came back, instead of the great galactic that we thought we were going to see. So, but we had to find out. So NASA came and said, yeah, we can fix this. Well, they always say they can fix it. But we had to know, was it desirable to fix it? And who said so? Was it feasible? So we had to turn to other experts and commission studies. And then, was it achievable to be able to do this? And then, was it affordable? And how to put together that coalition. Then, doing that, we had to go back and bank on a lot of the same people who'd screwed up in the first place. So it was a little nail biter there. And then on 4 different occasions, we had to go back and get the money and prove it all over again to service it. So that was, but we could not have done it without, one, the desire to test it out. So when we saw, was it a failure, and could it be rescued? And not just go on braggadocio that, oh yeah, we can fix it, and so on. The other, though, is this whole issue where people say, you're the failure. You don't look the part. The whole area of who should be, who's welcomed, who isn't. And as President Obama said, the whole power of saying, yes, we can. And I think back really to 2 fantastic women who did enormous contributions to the space program. When one thinks of Dr. Katherine Johnson, you remember her from the movie Hidden Figures, and her colleagues, growing up in a segregated society, being a mathematic prodigy, going to segregated schools, using segregated libraries, but she said, yes, we can, and helped change really space flight or make safe space flight when she said, yes, I can. Dr. Grace Roman, who was the name of the first chief astronomer at NASA. Dr. Roman had very poor eyesight as a child. Very poor eyesight. And yet in her book, in her recollection, she said, I always looked up because there was always something to see. And she saw the best in people, and she saw what astronomy could do. So you see what we're talking about. And me, I wanted to be Madame Curie. Well, you would not have wanted me as a lab partner. You would not. But you would want me as your senator. You would have wanted me as your partner in other things, and could partner with those who could. And that's why I said, be best at what you're best at. Be best at what you're needed for. No one's a failure. No one. And when people say it's not your time, your term, you don't look the part, say, yes, we can. And go for it.
That's great. Actually, Senator, I wanted to follow up on some of those themes that you were raising there by talking about so many different groups of people who are relevant. And also you explicitly say behind me is a whole lot of we, and that it doesn't just come down to one individual. And so could you elaborate a little bit more on that? And I'm specifically thinking now about the role of advocacy in science. Who are those essential players, those key stakeholders that we need to have at the table? It obviously isn't just us scientists. We need some help.
Well, when you say at the table, first of all, think of it more as a diner tour. So there's not like always a single table. And by the way, I have to do a shout out for the people who were here with me on my appropriations committee that saw me through, and we saw so many near-death experiences with Hubble, didn't we? I mean, truly. Paul Carliner, Jean Tolleisen, Gab Batkin, who played herself in the film, Karen Byrick, really, Kevin Kelly, who I know is watching Hopkins at home. Because first of all, any good policymaker needs a good staff. And one, you need people who are professionally competent, but also have the values that you share. And our values were we believed in science, and we believed in scientists. And we felt it was our job to help them be them, but also bring in a dose of reality around feasibility and affordability. So when you talk about who's at the advocacy table, first of all, it starts with personal relationships. I am so pleased that in my elected life, I have had a personal relationship, a personal and professional relationship with every president of Johns Hopkins University. This is important, and it's important for the scientists to reach out to elected officials. It's important that I would come to the Space Telescope Institute, not only for the Halloween parties, which were great, but also to get to know what they were doing. And my question always was, how can I help you be you? What is it that we needed? Was it financial resources? Was it executive branch inertia? All of those kinds of things. And so one is, and don't wait. The other form of advocacy is to tell your story. I know one of the things that Dr. Katz did was make the great movie about the particle. Now, we didn't know, you know, that, I'll call it the super collider you have in that mountain?
The Large Hadron
went over
Collider.
budget. I mean, you all were.
We did.
Before you busted the atom and found the God particle, we did a lot of, oh my God, what the hell are they doing up there? So we did a lot of, oh my gods. But really, the movie, the telling of the movie, and also telling your stories in not only the traditional scientific avenues of peer-reviewed articles, but finding popular ways to communicate. And also, don't wait for a crisis to reach out to those people who make the decisions. It's establishing the relationship. It's also interning, even in a public office, doing those kinds of things that I think are important. But you need the advocates, you need the experts, and you need the decision makers. And most of all, you need to have the will that this was important to do and to be able to demonstrate it. I dream for the day, once again, when we can value empirical evidence. There was a time when the Congress all valued empirical evidence. I hope for that day to come back. And but in the meantime, keep on doing what you're doing, reaching out to the electeds, tell your story, and I think you'll be surprised at the help you'll get.
I think that's good advice. For the scientists, taking some of that the other way, when we think about progress in science, we try to understand, especially here at Hopkins, the connections between basic science, national spending priorities, and innovation. And so then what does the US government owe to scientific research? What do the public citizens paying their taxes owe to scientific research? Especially when there is risk, there's uncertainty, and we don't know the outcomes. So start with Joe on that one.
In the long run, any basic scientific research would lead to advancements in many, many areas. The space program is the most obvious example. Microelectronics, computers, microbiology, all of it was an outcome of actually competition between Soviet Union and United States in space exploration. Who is going to make it to the moon first? So when you advance technology, new outcomes come out of it. Whether it is medicine, and as a result of it, it contributes to the welfare of the entire society, to knowledge, to our telecommunication, to our ability to observe and be exposed to information that was totally unbelievable only 20 years ago. All of it is a result of somewhere along the line it started as basic scientific research that then evolved into new ideas, new technologies. You need to communicate, so you invented microelectronics as part of the space program. You need to carry satellite to space. Rocket technology has been developed. Of course, it has military applications as well. Aviation had military and civilian applications. It has changed our life completely. So in the long run, science contributes to the society as a whole.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to add to that one, or?
I didn't like the word "oh."
Yeah.
I didn't like the word. That's not to be cranky about you, Doctor, but what does America owe to science? Well, or the taxpayer? Well, we really don't know anything, except in the larger values of our country, where we want a safer, stronger country. And one would be to undertake those things that the private sector cannot or will not do. So, and if we look at, it's the job of the government to maintain, quote, the national defense. Well, one would be a defense against disease, a defense against climate catastrophe, not even climate change, climate catastrophe, which we're in. And then to do that, and what would be where the government would be willing to make public investments first in people. And I think it's the obligation of the government to do all that it can to build the pipeline for the next generation, so people don't feel that they're indentured servants when they complete their early education. So one is to build the pipeline. Dr. Katz, just the way you talked about our competition with Russia after Sputnik, instead of thinking we were going to put, guns into space, the Congress passed the National Defense Act, which was to increase science teachers and scholarships and grants and fellowships to invest in the development of scientists so that they could come up with the new ideas that would make us safer, or come up with the new ideas that would lead to the new jobs, and to undertake also the basic part. That's the job of the National Science Foundation. That's the job of the NIH. The NIH is not a pharmaceutical company. When the National Science Foundation goes and works on developing something called nanotechnology, which we've not yet seen the promise of yet, but still to undertake that. So the role of the government is to look about the long-range needs of its society and to invest in its human infrastructure, and also to invest in the research that will make that country a safer, better place. And what I liked about the Hubble, and I hope it will continue with the Webb and whatever follows after the Webb, like the Grace Roman telescope, is that what we find belongs to the common heritage of mankind. Hubble did not go into space to conquer it. Hubble went into space to discover it. And what is so great about the Hubble and the work that's done here and through others connected to it is we give this and we give it away. And I've often said a rich nation can build a space telescope, but a great nation contributes its knowledge and its discovery to the common heritage of mankind. And I think that's what a nation does, and do that kind of basic hard stuff. The vanity players that are going into space now, isn't it cutesy? I become a billionaire, I don't pay my taxes, I hide them somewhere, and then I go off into space for 4 minutes and float around. You can see what I think about all that.
Tell us what you really think.
They can spend their money any way they want. I wish they would pay their taxes so we could use it for other things like right here, like pay off your student debt. But again, it's to do the risk research. And we've seen it in the great federal labs that this country does support.
So if I can interrupt, I think you've gone a ways toward answering a question that we received from a student who's in the class of 2024, noting that after the American moon landing and even more recently, there has been criticism about the amount of money that goes into space exploration when we know that our communities here on Earth face homelessness, hunger, poverty, climate change, climate crisis, and other existential threats. So the political scientists may only worry about distributing funds, and the benefits of scientific progress are indisputable, but how do we still reconcile that price in dollars of space science with the struggles faced by people, say, here in Baltimore?
It's yes and. In other words, you have to do both. So it's not only space science, it's science generally. And like, why should we fund NOAA and study the ocean? And of course, one of the things at NASA is the mission to Planet Earth, where we study our own planet as if it were a distant star, which tells us an awful lot about what we need to do to deal with the issues of the climate catastrophe. But yes, there are problems with exactly what you said right here and now, but it's yes and. And I believe that, again, when you work multilaterally, you can find these resources to do this kind of research. And the whole NASA budget was about $19 or $20 billion. $19 or $20 billion. Well, the 50% of all discretionary funding goes to defense. And by the way, I'm for a strong defense. But you know, we spent more on water supply in Iraq that didn't work than we did on getting the lead out of the water in our own country. So I believe we need to look at what our overall priorities are and make investments in our country and in our future. And I believe scientific research will make us safer and will make us stronger and come up with this. So one of the ways to deal with being without a home is to have a job at a living wage where you can afford to have one. And where are these new jobs going to come from? I do support the Biden agenda. I think his ideas on climate change are really amazing. And again, Elon Musk is able to do his electric car thing. We know Elon. I know Elon. I knew him when, he was more of a pal than PayPal. So, and all of the things that he did. But the fact is that when he says Hearst will buy X number of cars, it will be transformational. But also transformational is that President Biden is recommending that the post office go totally electric. What does that mean? It means trucks, one of our biggest emitters of carbon emissions, truck traffic, could be changed because by the government buying post office trucks, all trucks will eventually become cheaper. And then becoming cheaper, more available to everyone from, big trucking companies to Joe the plumber in his white van. So this is where there needs to be collective action on all fronts. There's not a single thing.
So thanks for that. And following up with a more specific aspect of this for David, thinking about parallels of your own work with the European Council for Nuclear Research and the Hadron Collider, the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. So given the uncertainties about what could happen with the collisions, how did you continue to advocate for the collider? And in that same sense, how did you sell this or portray this as a public good, especially after you face some problems like a helium leak during initial testing?
Well, first, let me just say I agree completely with the senator. None of these questions are a zero-sum game. We're pushing on all fronts to try to solve lots of puzzles. And the Large Hadron Collider is a puzzle. It's an out there puzzle, but it's something about the basic laws of nature and understanding not just how matter behaves, but in some sense what physical reality is. And you can think about the fact when you're an individual, the first level of being human is being safe, is surviving. And that's, of course, the needs you have to make sure are met. And that has to be met across the board for all humans and for a society as well. And that means protection of individuals, and protection of a nation. And then at the second level, a human being wants to thrive. They want to make sure that they have enough, but they have more than enough, and they can support the people around them in a country and thrive in that way, be healthy and make healthy choices. But the third level of being human is inspiration. We want to be inspired. We're here for a finite time. And in that finite time, what can we do with this thing that we are? What can we do with that life, that finite life? Can we do something truly special? And if you think about a nation or a planet as a species, what can we do as a race, a human race? And I would think you'd want to do something aspirational. And something we can do is figure out what physical reality is. What are we? Why are we here? What is around us? What are we a part of? We are often described as being made of stardust because most of the chemicals in our body are divined by stars and the explosions that come afterwards and strewn across the universe. But we are a part of the universe trying to figure out what we are, what this is. We're the part of the universe that's responsible for checking it out and seeing what's going on. And that is just something that we can do. And as a human race or as a nation, we can decide we want to participate that or not. And so if you're trying to build something that's never been built before and it explodes, but you can fix it, is it important enough? Like, was Hubble important enough to fix? You bet. If there are people who are inspired enough to say, yes, this is worth it, if astronauts are inspired enough to do something risky to make sure something important happens, they do it. And the senator is doing something or has done something her whole life, which I find much more complicated than what I do in my job. I find science easy compared to what she does. And I only see a little taste of the puzzle she had to solve and the clever moves that she and her staff had to figure out to solve problems which in the background look very logical. Oh, that's important, why don't you fix it? But I understand in the political world it's extraordinarily complicated. We would call it a nonlinear system. And nonlinear systems don't have obvious solutions. And so I would very much like the senator to be my lab partner. There's a bigger question to answer.
Well, Doctor, your work, when you study the laws of science and the laws of physics, they do follow a rational basis.
They
I
do.
wasn't involved in a rational universe.
Maybe it's different when people get very involved in your activities. Did anyone else have anything to add to this?
I think the inspiration is important, and also scientists can be inspired. I mean, look how I was inspired by the life of Madame Curie, and though I didn't become a scientist, it sparked my lifelong passion for supporting science. When one looks at what the Hubble has done, what NASA has done, the inspirational figures there, and then when we tell those stories, I think are really important. And the Hubble itself has been an incredible ambassador, and it's been an incredible educator. You know, when it looked like Sean O'Keefe was going to cancel the Hubble, that last and final servicing mission, the children of Australia took up a collection that they wanted to go into the pot to keep the Hubble going. Well, why did they even know about it? It's because what we did, and here, right even here at the Space Telescope Institute, when I talk about what we give away as educators, whether you were in South Baltimore, South Dakota, South Africa, or Australia, you had access to learning about the Hubble, to working with groups like Aurora, the Space Telescope Institute, and so on. What were teaching tools and so on, so that boys and girls could learn about the universe and see pictures of it and be inspired. The Hubble, this telescope, when Gabrielle Botkin said it had a personality, it did. And I know I have a personal affection for the Hubble. I follow it. I know, is it okay? Is it going in intensive care this week? I mean, but seriously, it is, who would think the technology, because for a long time NASA felt only astronauts would inspire people to go into space science, you know, astronomy, astrophysics, what the kind of things represented here at this table. And yet, really, technology has done it. Aren't we all following Mars rover? I am. And so I think the inspirational part. And I also want to talk about what many scientists do in their own time, in their own dime. A group of scientists at Goddard went to work with the Smithsonian because they wanted to help those who not normally have access have it, and this was blind children. The people at NASA, some of the scientists, worked with the Smithsonian to publish a book, a Braille, listen to this, a Braille book on astronomy. And it was called, you know, Touch the October Sky, or Touch the Invisible Sky. Isn't that phenomenal? Isn't that just wonderful? I mean, first of all, that on their own, then with some help from some others, developed this book. And also, I just mentioned Dr. Katherine Johnson. The Smithsonian has just put out a whole series of books about Dr. Johnson and other scientists of color about their work. And it's done at various grade levels. So you see, just as we did the movie about the particle, the CERN movie, and so on. But this is very inspirational. I mean, can you imagine somewhere in the United States today, a child who is visually impaired picked up a Braille book and learned about astronomy? That gives me goosebumps. Think about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry we don't have with us some of those examples that you can actually touch and see to appreciate what wonderful resources these kinds of things are. Your point about inspiration is very meaningful as I think about the Hubble Deep Field, which we saw mentioned in the film. We also have some lithographs of it that I encourage everyone who's here to take them home. Please enjoy them. These are for you. And that's so inspiring because there's so much in just a small piece of space, and there's so much that can be done with it. So there were intentions of the astronomers who first decided to look at this patch of space, but then there's so much more that others could do with the same observations. And that's part of the value of putting things into the archive for anyone to access and discover. So that's things that are far away, things that are truly large, those distant galaxies. For Sabina, though, in the scheme of things that you look at, merely planets, are not quite so large. They're relatively nearby, but being so close by, we can appreciate some of their complexity, and we get some of the details there. So that's what I'd like to hear a little bit about. Is what are some of the challenges and the complexity in learning about our own planets in the solar system, even though we can, in some sense, go to them?
Yeah, great question. So we have a saying amongst my friends and colleagues. We say planets are hard. The reason they're hard is they're far enough away that they're hard to get to, right? They're hard to study, but they're close enough that we can actually send really cool instruments there to collect a lot of really fancy data that then we can use to learn about the planets. So one big challenge with that is, you know, when we send a mission to Mars or we send a mission to Jupiter, you know, after that launch, that spacecraft is gone. If something's going to go wrong, there's nothing we can do about it anymore. We can't send astronauts there to help, right? And so that's very challenging. And also, it takes a really long time to get to places in the solar system. Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab is in charge of a mission called Dragonfly. Don't know if you know about it, but we'll be going to Saturn's moon Titan. I'm not involved in the mission, but I'm a massive super fan of it. But the plan is launch in 2027, arrival at Saturn's moon Titan in 2034, right? And so you start doing this, and you start thinking, am I still going to be doing science then? What am I going to do in the meantime, right? So science, when you're dealing with things like planets that are fairly far away and take a lot of time, you have a really long baseline to work on a project. These aren't projects that take a year or two, that take 10 years. These are projects that can take a lifetime. And so you kind of start these things and know that maybe you're not going to be the one that finishes them, right? Someone else is going to finish them, the next generation. And that's when it's really important to work on that inspiration stuff, because we've got to make sure to train that next generation so they can work on them. The other really hard thing about planets is that we can only really interact with their surfaces and their atmospheres, this outer part where we are, right? The work I do is really about trying to understand what's going on deep inside the planet, right? And that's what happens inside determines everything at the surface, right? If you name something at the surface, I will tell you why it's related to something going on deep inside the planet. And so it's really hard to see inside planets. We can actually see farther into the sun than we've kind of gone physically in the Earth, right? This is how hard it is. There's this great poem. It's a haiku by a Japanese poet, Issa. Oh, I'm going to get it wrong. On this earth, on this world, we walk on the roof of hell, gazing at flowers, right? And I think that's such a good literal description of what goes on when we try to study planets, right? We sit here and we look at the beauty and the amazements of everything that happens on the surface, but it's all really kind of happening on top of this massive, like, can you imagine what's going on when you're 200 kilometers down inside the Earth, when you're 2,000 kilometers down inside the Earth, right? It's such an amazing environment to study. So I think those are the two hard things about planets. They're just close enough and just far enough to be able to go to, but really hard to get there. And we can only really see their surface.
And Joe, I'm wondering if you have some follow-up in these kinds of challenges that you're facing, or whether you've had similar threads of your own research where you've had this long time in between the initial idea and being able to really get to the bottom of it.
In general, when you develop a new instrument, you start by having a new idea and you think about it. Like you indicated before, you talk to colleagues that try to talk you out of it. And then you start exploring it, and you go through the process of obtaining the funding for it, developing it, making all the mistakes, and not sleeping a few nights, etc., etc., etc. Sometimes it takes years until you see your first data point. And then you stare at it and you have no idea what you're seeing. But that's what makes it so wonderful. You go to the ocean, you go to the interior of the planet Earth, we dive in the ocean. We want to look at plankton dynamics. I went back to the ocean, by the way, initially to look at microbubbles as sources of nucleation sites of cavitation.
Yeah,
I saw a few bubbles, but I saw all kinds of creatures. The most amazing plethora of shapes. I had no idea how to pronounce their names. So you go and look for biologists, resident biologists around, and they look at it and went crazy. And it started 25 years of collaboration. We went diving together. I don't know if you'll have an opportunity to go in a manned submersible, diving to several hundred meters deep. But you're in an aquarium, but here the fish come to look at you. and you sit there imagine yourself a 5-foot diameter acrylic sphere, and you are in total darkness. And in a minute they turn the propulsors, all the ocean lights up because of bioluminescence. This is an amazing phenomenon. It's like driving in a snowstorm. So I'm like a little child. When I was a little child, I had cheap toys. Now I have expensive toys. and we are playing. And in the process of playing, we discover new things. And it's a very nonlinear system, as you indicated. You don't really know what you're going to find out, and you get surprises. Some of those so-called failures are a result of those surprises. You're taking equipment from an air-conditioned lab to a deck of a boat. When it moves 20 feet up and down and you're deadly seasick, it's not exactly the same condition. But it's the challenge that drives you. So you collaborate, you look for smart colleagues. This is why it's so nice to be in wonderful universities like we are sitting in, or University of Maryland. Some of my biology colleagues are there. And you never work on the same problem. You constantly move forward. Move forward in technology, move forward looking at new systems, new ideas. You discover things. So it's so exciting.
That's great. I think some of the people in the audience, either here or online, are already thinking ahead and following up, looking ahead to the James Webb Space Telescope, which, as we heard, will be launching in December 18th. So for those of you who are less familiar with it, it's an orbiting infrared observatory, and it will very much complement and extend what Hubble can do. So there are ways that we expect Webb to be changing our understanding of the universe and even our own place in it. And so for the senator, what can we learn from Hubble as we go on to thinking about Webb to help us advocate for the Webb telescope and its possibilities?
Well, first of all, I want the Webb to be as plucky and as enduring and resilient as the Hubble. But I would also hope that the Webb would continue the values and roles that we did in the Hubble. First of all, that the knowledge that we gain, we give to the world, that it belongs to not the United States of America only, but it belongs to the common heritage of mankind to make with it what they will, knowing we're not sure, as you so eloquently described tonight, Doctor. So that's number one. Number two, I want the Webb to be like the Hubble as being a great ambassador to really work and be available to the world. I want the Webb to be like the Hubble, a great explorer, continuing to look out over space and to look deep into time, to answer the really big questions in astronomy, physics, cosmology, and to do that. So we want the Hubble, the Webb, to be an explorer. We want it to be an ambassador in terms of the world. We want the Webb to also be an educator so that it can continue to be used by everyone from a school child all the way to those that are working in, who have advanced degrees or working on advanced research. So we know that the Webb, James Webb, is not a replacement of Hubble. It's a successor to Hubble. But we want the Webb to remember, why was the Hubble a success? Not only the fantastic pictures and all it sent back here to Earth, but why the Hubble was truly the Hubble. And then may the Webb weave whatever it does as it looks for the universe. So that's what I'd want for the Webb. And I would hope when we do the Grace Roman one eventually, I don't know if I'll still be here. I might be circling somewhere. Talking to the angels. Can you believe that, what they're doing? But, you know, so we look forward to the web. We really want the web to go. The web's had a bumpy road, but it's in isn't Miss Backen, isn't in French Guiana now?
It is in French Guiana right now, yes.
It'll move to the launch pad.
Yep.
And we'll keep our fingers crossed.
And go a million miles away from us. So we're looking forward to that. For all of you, including the senator on that theme, what are you most excited about with Webb? It could be science that's related to your own. It could be something that just for the sake of wonder you're looking forward to.
Well, James Webb is looking at a different frequency band, and that might sound boring and technical, but what that means is we're looking at a different kind of light at very far distances, and whenever we look with a new device and a new mediator of information, which is infrared light, we will see things that we could never see before, like going under the sea or other techniques. And so what I'm most excited about is to see things we hadn't even anticipated. There are many things that James Webb can do, but I suspect there are going to be things that it can do that we didn't expect, because we don't know everything about the universe. And when you look in a new way, you're going to see things you didn't know were there. And then once we know they're there, it means something else that we can do to figure out what's going on.
For me, science-wise, one amazing thing that JWST is going to do is it's going to be able to tell us about the atmospheres of planets, and that's planets in our solar system as well as planets orbiting other stars. And that's so important because the atmospheres are really what's going to tell us, is this a place that might be habitable, right? In our search for life in the universe and the origin of life in the universe, understanding what the planets are made of, what's going on in their atmospheres is going to be crucial. And JWST has the capability of doing that, so that's really exciting. And from a personal note, my PhD was on understanding Uranus and Neptune, and we had one mission go to Uranus and Neptune in the 1980s. It did one flyby of each. JWST is going to be looking at Uranus and Neptune, and this is very exciting because it's been a long time since we've been there. But also, I think, growing up, I actually had pictures of the Hubble Deep Field plastered all over my walls, right? And so I really hope that JWST is able to inspire that next generation with whatever comes out of it, is that people are going to be plastering their walls with what we find out from that, and that this next generation of scientists, I really hope that the science community, the space community, academia, can be a place that is much more supportive of a diverse group of people that can do science, and that's what I'm really hopeful for JWST.
Right. Joe, is there something you're looking forward to from Webb?
New findings. We are curious creatures. I'm not going to be involved directly with it, but I'm going to follow up. I'm going to learn new things. So, new tool, new toy.
that sense of discovery. And Senator Mikulski, is there something specific you're looking forward to from Webb?
That it works.
Yes, that's a good point for honesty. We're certainly looking forward to that. Looking
at the near-death crew here. We've been through so much. But that's discovery. I mean, that's the way it is. That is risk.
It is risk. If this were easy, it would have already been done before. We wouldn't give our hearts and our lives to these projects over so much time. If it didn't give us challenges, but also the great ability to overcome some of those challenges. Well, I really appreciate everything that all of you have had to say. I can't believe it, but we have zoomed through all of the time that we have here, but it's just been a wonderful evening with such an inspirational story inspirational stories all around. And I hope that especially our students in the audience can use this as a little bit of food for thought and your own inspiration, that you may wind up doing great things, starting from where you are now. So thank you all for being here. Thank you so much to everyone with Hopkins at Home and the others who have made this whole event possible. I encourage everyone who's here to, again, take wonderful lithographs of the Hubble Deep Field, Hubble itself, and also to take candy bars that we have, keeping with our Halloween theme. And thanks so much as well to everyone who is able to join us online.
Dr. Levinson, may I just say something before we wrap up? First of all, I would like to thank Dean Salenza and Dr. Bess Vinson here at the Krieger School, who really thought about doing this as part of the Mikulski Archives, not only the archive, the library here, the mast that's part of the Hubble Archives, but I've donated my papers here to Hopkins. They're being archived now. That there'd be a story and a human being behind, like the memos, and we want to thank them, and we hope to do one also next on women's health. So I want to really thank them and really thank President Daniels for inviting me to come to Hopkins. You know, when I retired from the Senate, I was ready to turn the page but not do a final chapter. So inviting me to come here to be part of the faculty has been really a great opportunity. And I want to thank everyone from the Space Telescope Institute, the Aurora, and most of all, you know, you've heard me say, I'm going to help you be you. I want to thank my appropriations team that's here tonight that helped me be me, Carl Leiner, Gene Tolleisen. He has a first name and a Hopkins graduate, Gabrielle Backen, Jeremy, Kevin Kelly, who's watching, and then also my own team here at Hopkins that helped me be me here at Hopkins with Louise Flavahan and Melissa Baranowski. So it's been a great evening, and the film crew, didn't you really like the movie? Didn't they do a good job? All the fun, and but also to the students and maybe the beginning faculty. You know, when I first came over here 30 years ago and walked around, and Dr. Giacconi explained to me what was going on here, the founder of the Space Telescope Institute. And over those years now, I was so mesmerized by not only what the Space Telescope was and what it was going to do, but I was mesmerized by all of the young people that were working on it. It's hard to believe that they're now 30 years older. Hopefully they're department heads and tenured and get all the grants that they could possibly want in the world or the universe with this crowd. And but really, I'm going to say to the young people, it is really your time. It is really your term. And I hope as you continue your academic work and getting yourself credentialed, also you must think about civic participation. You need to be champions, yes, of the compelling human needs of homelessness, hunger, but also we really need to, in our own country right now, stand up for science and scientists. Look about how to be involved. Every chance you can get, think about it. But also think that no matter what you do in your career, think about how to make the world a better place. And think about how you can help somebody be them. And may the force be with us.